The Dharma, incomparably profound and exquisite, is rarely met with even in hundreds of thousands of millions of kalpas. We now can see it, hear it, accept and hold it. May we realize the true mind of the Tathagata. Today is August 5th, 2023, and this is Zazenkai at Mountain Gate in northern New Mexico. Zazenkai in Japanese means sitting zazen, meeting. So we're meeting, and all of us are sitting zazen. Za means to sit. So you're sitting on your zafu, which is sitting on the zabuton, and you're doing zazen, sitting meditation. Sitting meditation is a route to an amazing freedom that is actually innate in every human being, but most people are not really motivated to uncover it. When we are children, some of us have a sense that there is something beyond what we ordinarily think and feel and know and what we're taught. For other people, sometimes a traumatic experience will cause them to question reality. It's actually well known that people who have had trauma are highly motivated to do spiritual work. When things don't come the way we expect them to, we have to wonder what's beyond. And I'd like to share something from someone recently. This is from a physician who was working with an elderly. She was high 80s, I believe, in the ICU in the hospital, and she was dying, and she had dementia. In fact, she was delirious. And this woman was doing hands-on work, and the woman died. That was to be expected. And then the next night, the same physician woke up with a sense that the dying woman had passed on, as the term goes, and was communicating with her and expressing gratitude for the work she had done, that it had helped her make the transmission, and that she was free. Before she died, the woman's son had showed the physician photographs of his mother, who was a tribal dancer and also a trapeze artist. I'm not sure that really computes, but it's an interesting combination. And this woman had actually made her own buckskin clothes, sewed her own buckskin clothes. And that's not a ordinary feat. And I doubt that she used a sewing machine. So she was clearly a very, very aware human being. And the dance had helped with that. So had the trapeze work. You can't let your mind wander if you're on a bar up in the air and swinging. So it was very interesting that she came later, after death, to express her gratitude and to let her know that she had passed peacefully, and the sense was one of deep peace. Here she was, demented, delusory, and not in what normal people would consider to be her right mind as she was dying. Whether she was frightened of dying or not is not clear, but the aspect of hands-on touch clearly made a difference for her. But also probably she was, in her history, prepared for that as well. The amount of attention and awareness, the amount of let-go-ness, presence, deep presence that many Native Americans have was already priming her for recognizing her original face. Years ago at one of the Christmas meetings at the church down here in Ojosarco, there was an elderly Native American woman with her son. And I had never seen people so quiet inwardly. It's not common among we WASP persons. Those of us who are not born into a natural setting and have not tuned into that natural setting culturally have a certain disadvantage in this. But it brings up the question, what is that original face? What does happen to us when we die? It is something that we all need to go into, ponder silently. By silently, I mean without thinking. Tuning into our body and letting our body feel this pondering question wordlessly. This deep question, which is really what all human beings have had to deal with. But most people are not, as I said in the beginning, willing to take a look. It's too frightening for people, and we escape in many different ways, as I said earlier this morning. We escape into work, we escape into reading, we escape into movies, we escape into parties, we escape into drinking, we escape into drugs, we escape into risky living. In Albuquerque some time ago, within the last couple of years, at midnight, a car was clocked at 140 miles an hour, going up the wrong direction on a major street in Albuquerque. The police didn't try to follow the guy. It would have been too dangerous, but they did get his license number, and accosted him. They went to see him the next day. I don't know what happened, but I assume that he has been charged with something or other, endangering the public at the least. That's so fast that you can't possibly stop with any security for quite a long time. When I was taking driver's ed, we were taught in high school that you keep a car length distance behind anybody you're following who's a car, depending on how fast they're going. If they're going 70 miles an hour, you keep 7 car spaces between you and them. If they're going 50, you can get a little closer. Nowadays, people go much closer than that without really some sense of what could happen. There's a sense of security that they can stop on a dime, but it doesn't happen. Many, many accidents take place from rear-ending collisions. So we try not to face this big question. We will die. There's no question about that. As far as history knows, no one has survived physically past a certain point. But then what happens? In Christianity, they talk about a soul that leaves and goes to purgatory, the intermediate state, and then depending on how they lived their life, they were either going to heaven, eternally or to hell eternally. In Buddhism, we don't see it that way. Your last dying thought as you move out of this life is what will move you into what's next. And if your last dying thought is one of great fear or anxiety, and with the old woman who is experiencing dementia, and it's not clear that she was not present. People have ideas about dementia, about delusion, and so on. But unless we're there, we don't really know. It's interesting that people who are in comas and come out of the coma were quite active while they were supposedly near death, or supposedly at least not present. So this raises a lot of questions about life and death and what happens and what freedom means. Having an enlightened experience, and I should say here, one enlightenment experience will not do it. We have to continually go deeper, because there's much deeper to go. And an initial kensho is not going to liberate us fully by any means. So we need to ponder, again silently, deeply, no matter what happens. We're not trying to shut anything out, but we're being so absorbed in these perpetual questions that other things begin to fall away. And we gradually go deeper into the sense in the body, and continue going deeper. And then suddenly we'll see something, hear something, do something, and there will be an insight. There was a man who was going to Sesshin, Rohatsu Sesshin, I think it was, at not at Bukokuji, at what was it? The temple that Roshi Kapleau trained in Japan, Hoshinji. And he was deeply focused, but he did not have a kensho at the end of Sesshin, by the end of Sesshin. Yet he still continued to work on his koan as he was walking back home. Now, if you've ever been to Obama, Japan, you know that there are a lot of railroad tracks that run through that town. And as he was walking, ready to cross a track, they're all clustered too, by the way. A train was coming along, and the train horn blasted, and he jumped out of the way and had triggered a kensho. We don't really know. And if we're sitting on our cushion, waiting for it to happen, with one eye on our practice and the other eye on whether we're getting there fast, which is something I went through for some time in Rochester in my early days, it's not going to get there. We have to be so fully absorbed, as this woman must have been, so present, because there was nothing else to do but be present. She could have been worried. She could have been fighting it, as some people do. And the experience of this physician was so different from other women, in fact, that she had known dying, who fought it tooth and nail. There were stories my then daughter-in-law told me about the hospital in Rochester, New York she worked in, which has got a very high population of Roman Catholic Italians. And there is a certain amount of fear taught to people in that religion about dying, about whether they're going to hell or heaven. And so these elderly Catholic women would die, she said, clutching their crucifixes. And after they were clinically dead, after they were officially dead, and the orderlies had come and covered their bodies with a sheet, their bodies continued to writhe for hours, as if still trying to fight it off. There is a verse to one of the Momokan koans. It says, "How will it be for you when the light of your eyes is falling? Will you be like the crab with its 7 arms and 8 legs, trying to get out of the boiling water? There are alternatives." And of course, we, as we're doing our Zazen, we tend to come up against a lot of barriers. These are barriers we have created ourselves, that in order not to be as present as we can with life, because sometimes there are frightening things that happen, and sometimes there are uncomfortable things to happen. Sometimes we're raised in an environment where we're degraded a lot, where people are looking at us or telling us we're no good. That's a fairly common thing in Western America. Something about the Puritan work ethic. But unlike in some religions where we are considered sinned, condemned from the moment we're born, in Buddhism, we are considered to be perfect, lacking nothing, whole and complete, and it's only because our minds are turned upside down through delusive thinking, which is in part encouraged by society and social media, we fail to perceive that. So who are we if we're not that person who's been hurt, if they're not that person who's succeeded mightily in some form? And all the ways we try to avoid encountering that, thinking about that, are what we're going to come up against in our Zen practice. So when these things come up, and they may not even be verbal, just feelings of despair or depression or anger or any number of other things, the way to work with them, to become free of them, and to go much more deeply into our mind exploration is to feel how they feel in our body, what the energy is in our body. This was the teaching of Longchenpa, the Tibetan master from, I think, 9th century, 10th century. And it's also well known in modern psychology as well, although it took modern psychology a lot longer to find that way of effective working. So this is what we can do. We have many models for it. The elderly Native American woman who had been so focused in her life, and despite the fact that she had dementia as she was dying, still had a most peaceful death. Of course, some of it had to do with the physician working with her, but not all of it. If she hadn't been open to that work through her long period of life where she was so fully focused, through the trapeze work, through the native dance, it wouldn't have happened. She would have had too much backlog for it to really work. So that original face, that face before our parents were born, that we are now and never have been, what is it? Yes, of course, this body's going to die. It doesn't live forever. But there's something else, this energy. We can't call it a soul because it's not separate. It's what moves the body. It's what allows speech and hearing and sight and touch and taste. As Master Rinzai said, there's a true person of no rank going in and out of the doors of your body. In the eyes, it is called seeing. In the nose, it is called smelling. In the mouth, it is called tasting. In the ears, it is called hearing. In the hands, it is called grasping. In the feet, it is called walking. If you haven't seen it yet, see it now. See it now. And this is a short teisho because what I'd like you to do is work on that. Yes, there are obstacles, but again, you can melt them through true presence in your body. It can take time, and when one particular kind of obstacle comes up, it may take a fair amount of time to melt it. But persist, and each obstacle melted will leave you more free. Thank you for listening. Stop now and recite the 4 vows.